The last time we experienced meaningful football, Austin Reed was dropping dimes leading West Florida to the program's first national championship. West Florida was able to hold off a furious Minnesota State comeback, leaving the Mavericks looking for their first championship. Will we see something similar this year? What teams will compete for supremacy in 2021? Let's find out now. The votes are in and have been counted, and that gives us a reason to preview the 25 teams in the D2Football poll. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us. It's been too long. From the home office, I'm Brandon Meisner, and it is wonderful to be talking about Division II football. For 2 months, we've been working to put together the best possible preview that we can of the teams in the top 25 poll. Our Sunday night panel will do the heavy lifting, but we will also be joined by experts from around the country to give their opinion on how teams have changed since the 2019 season. Well, you're probably ready to find out where your team is ranked. Matt Daniel is going to help count it down for us. Let's get started.
Number 25, Angelo State.
The Rams finished 8-3 in 2019. They finished third place in the Lone Star Conference and were 2-2 this past spring. They returned 3 starters on offense, 9 on defense. When the 2019 season ended, it looked like Angelo State would have many returning starters on both sides of the ball. A year later, the future is still bright, but there are more obstacles to overcome than would have existed. The defense returns a lot of starters in 8 of the top 10 tacklers from 2019. Linebacker Hunter Kyle and D-back Letty French were the top 2 and earned all-conference honors. Quarterback Zach Bronkhorst took most of the snaps on offense in the spring, but threw more interceptions than touchdowns. Kris Ferguson, the man with a degree from almost every Lone Star Conference school, joins us. And Kris, number 25 in the poll, Angelo State, but it seems right now there are quite a few questions in San Angelo.
Yeah, so Angelo State is a school that football team that really has some questions on offense. It looks like they're trying to revamp the offense to a more rushing-based attack based on what we saw in the spring. So the Sigma caller in 2019 graduated and brought Course, who was his replacement, kind of had a little bit of uneven spring, more interceptions and touchdowns, but it didn't stop Angelo from splitting their 4 games. They split against the FCS and actually beat Abilene Christian in a thriller. They split the 2 games that they played at WT, West Texas, mainly on the strength of the rushing attack, led by running back Alfred Greer. So I would say with Angelo, the strength of the team is probably the secondary, such as Letty French, which is a cornerback. There are guys that harass even the FCS teams from the secondary, interceptions everywhere. Really look forward to seeing them. Also, Jakar McCoy, who was a first team All Lone Star Conference last year, comes back as well. Angelo, the only team that they allowed more than 21 points, no longer plays D2 football. It is Tarleton State. And so the question is, can the offense keep up? So expect a hard-nosed rushing attack, and we'll see, if they can muster enough on offense to knock off a, number of teams that they have scheduled.
Number 24, Grand Valley.
The Lakers were 8-3 in 2019. They finished in third place in the GLIAC. They returned 9 starters on offense, 5 on defense. The only question is at quarterback. Cade Peterson is penciled in as a starter. He started 2 games in 2019. The receiving corps gets a boost with the transfer of Juwan Johnson. He was named LSC Receiver of the Year in 2018. Add in 2 NFL prospects on the line, and Grand Valley is ready to roll on offense. The defense has 5 starters returning, where the line is the strongest of the 3 levels. Joining us now is Jake Riepma. He is the GLIAC columnist for D2Football.com. Jake, Grand Valley, obviously a storied program in the GLIAC and in the country, one of the blue bloods of Division II. Looks like they've got things headed in the right direction in Allendale for this year.
Oh, no doubt about it. And you talk about Grand Valley, 2019 left a bitter taste in everybody's mind there in Allendale. And this is a team now looking forward to 2021. They're going to be loaded on both sides of the ball, but that's nothing new. Talk about what they've got going on up front. They've got returning starters that can dominate a game on the offensive side of the ball. Cade Pearson, look, 2-0 as a starter, led a comeback win against Delta State. And it feels like ancient history because that was all the way back in 2019. Of course, nobody in the GLIAC played in 2020 with the COVID year. So I'm looking forward to seeing how Matt Mitchell and company can utilize the assets they have on both sides of the ball and return to the Grand Valley prominence that we know they have.
Number 23, Lindenwood.
The Lions finished with a record of 9-4 in 2019. They were the GLVC champions, but lost to Northwest Missouri State in the second round of the playoffs, and returned 7 starters on offense and 8 starters on defense. The reason for optimism at Lindenwood starts with the return of a pair of All-Americans, quarterback Cade Brister on offense and linebacker Drew Sears on defense. Running back Nash Sutherland averaged 5.6 yards per carry in 2019, and Peyton Rose averaged 18.2 yards per catch. Both are back. On defense, all linebackers are back, highlighted by Sears, who had 175 tackles. In fact, the top 3 tacklers returned. That includes all GLVC defensive back Grady Daniels. Brian Ramos, the columnist for the GLVC, joins us. Brian, Lindenwood ended the 2019 season in disappointing fashion after a fantastic regular season, but there seems like there are a lot of reasons for optimism in St. Charles.
Absolutely. You know, the loss at Northwest Missouri State obviously leaves a bad taste in your mouth, but you can build off of that, their first ever playoff win on the road against Ouachita Baptist. They're bringing some key players back after sitting out the spring season due to just a lot of injury issues. They're healthy. They bring quite a bit of firepower, not least which Cade Brister and Drew Sears, the reigning offensive and defensive players of the year in the conference. Brister accounted for over 4,000 yards of total offense and 44 touchdowns. Meanwhile, Sears was just a monster on the field, 175 total tackles, 17 for a loss, 2 fumble recovers. They've got a nice mix of transfers and some experience and youth, and they're set up for a pretty good year.
Number 22, Tiffin.
The Dragons were 9-2 in 2019. They were champions of the GMAC and lost in the first round of the playoffs to Kutztown. They were 6-0 in the spring of 2021 and returned 5 starters on offense and defense. 7 projected starters earned all-conference honors during 2019. First-team quarterback Nick Watson is one of them. He threw for over 2,800 yards. Devin Butler returns at wide receiver. Anthony Lowe had a breakout spring, catching 40 passes in 6 games. All GMAC tight end Blake Darnell is also back. The defense has lost a little more since 2019. Charlie Cleveland was named the best defensive lineman in the GMAC. Latrell Robinson, who lines up opposite of Cleveland, was named second-team All-GMAC. And joining us now is Matt Witwicky. He is the NSIC columnist for D2Football.com, pinch hitting to talk about Tiffin. Matt, you're familiar with the coach at Tiffin. You're familiar with Tiffin a little bit. What are your thoughts on the 2021 season?
Yeah, I think the Dragon fans have a good reason to be optimistic, given the fact that Kris Reisert basically has been very successful in his short stint so far as head coach. They're 15-2 during that window of time. They come off a spring in which they went 6-0, as you mentioned. And, you take a look at their defense, gave up 8 points a game in the spring. They're returning a 4-year starting quarterback who's amassed over 9,000 yards passing and 1,000 yards rushing as well. So I think that they're really set for a strong season.
Number 21, Wingate.
The Bulldogs left with a record of 10-2 in 2019. They finished second place in the South Atlantic Conference and lost to West Florida in the first round of the playoffs. In the spring, they finished 2-2 and returned 6 starters on offense, 5 on defense. It might surprise some to know that Wingate has made the playoffs 3 years in a row. Whether or not it will be 4 depends largely on running backs Najir Peoples and Kalen Clark. Peoples earned all SAC honors in 2019, while Clark will try to replace Dominique McNeil, the other honoree. Quarterback Shaw Crocker is back after earning all conference honors as well. On defense, linebacker Josiah Carlton returns. He had 12 tackles for loss and was third on the team in total tackles. Chuck Bittner joins us. He is the South Atlantic columnist, also an editor on D2Football.com, also a great photographer for D2Football.com, pretty much a jack of all trades. But again, his primary responsibility is as a columnist for D2Football.com. And Chuck, Wingate probably not the most well-known program in the South Atlantic Conference. I would probably go to Lenore Ryan or Carson Newman, but the Bulldogs have been successful, and 2021 looks to be a successful season for them as well.
I fully expect that it will be, and Wingate may not be the most recognized name in the South Atlantic Conference, but that certainly has been changing over the last several years. Just consider that in the last 5 years, Wingate actually is the winningest program in the South Atlantic Conference. They've won more overall games and more conference games than any program in the SAC since 2016. As we head into 2021, they've got their eyes set on another contending for the SAC championship and possibly make another run towards the playoffs, which if they could do that, it'll be their fourth consecutive year in the playoffs, which is a major achievement. If they're going to get there, they've got a couple of assets that they're going to rely on. Wingate always has a strong running game. Najir Peoples is a featured running back. He's going to be back again this year. Did not play in Wingate's spring season, so that contributed partly to some of the offensive struggles that they had during that short spring season, but he's back. That really fills out the running back room. And it really starts with Shaw Crocker as an experienced quarterback. This is going to be his third full season as a starting quarterback, so expect a big year out of him. And offensive line play should be outstanding for the Bulldogs, as it typically is. I think that they'll probably have at least 3 players that will be solid candidates for all conference and all region honors. A little bit of retooling to do on the defensive side of the ball, but again, up front, they're typically very, very strong. It's usually a good run-stopping defense, so they'll be ready for this SAC schedule. It sets up nicely for them. They have a lot of home games on the early part of the schedule to really get them off to a good start. I think they'll probably be favored in most of the early season games, and that should really set them up nicely as they get into the later stretch run where they're typically very good. So I think that being preseason ranked is something that they've certainly earned, and I think that we'll probably see them, if not in the poll, very much in the race in the regional rankings when we get into November.
Number 20, IUP.
The Crimson Hawks were 10-2 in 2019. They finished second in the PSAC West and lost to Shepherd 31-27 in the first round of the playoffs. They returned 6 starters on offense and 3 on defense. IUP had the best defense in the PSAC West, but things will look different in 2021. First team All-PSAC D-back Nazir Streeter is back for his senior season. He is joined by second team defensive lineman D2 Fisher. The offense is in better shape. Justice Evans and Malik Anderson will provide a 2-pronged attack at running back. At quarterback, the Crimson Hawks will have to find a replacement for Quentin Maxwell. Matt Berglund joins us. He covers IUP for the Indiana Gazette. He's also the former columnist for D2Football.com for the PSAC. Matt, expectations seem to be pretty high in Indiana, and they've quietly become one of the most consistent programs in the country.
I think if you were going to describe things right now, they would probably call it like realistically optimistic, if that makes any sense. They've got a lot of talent coming back, not necessarily in starters, but guys who have played a lot of football, especially some who have transferred from elsewhere, so they played in other places. But IUP is coming off a 10-2 season from 2019. They made the playoffs for the 4th time in 5 years, and to speak to that consistency, they have a 15-11 record over the past 5 years, which is the 5th best record in all of Division II across the country. They've been very consistent that way. But the players they have, the key players they have coming back, a lot of them are on offense at skill position. They've got 3 really good wide receivers. One of them, Dwayne Brown, was a breakout star as a sophomore, but they've got 2 Division I transfers at receiver. Irvin Charles from Penn State and Daquan Green started out Florida and went to Murray State. On the defensive line, they've got some new guys there filling in, but D2 Fisher and Rania Mitchell are 2 guys who have played a lot who will really stand out. At cornerback on defense is going to be another key position where they have Bryce Gibson transferring in from Youngstown State, and he'll match up with Nazir Streeter, who was an all-region pick last year. But I think the real key to IUP's success this year is going to be a quarterback. They have a transfer from Eastern Illinois, Harry Woodbury. He's a native of Texas near Houston, and they really have high hopes for him. He's got 1 year of eligibility left. But the key thing every year with IUP could be the schedule. They play 10 games. 5 of them are against teams that made the playoffs in 2019. So they've got their work cut out for them as it is. But I think they're really optimistic about how things could turn out.
Number 19, Shepherd.
The Rams were 11-3 in 2019. They were second place in the PSAC East and lost to Slippery Rock in the second round of the playoffs. They were 1-0 this past spring and returned 7 starters on offense, 8 on defense. There's a lot of optimism in Shepherdstown. That's especially true at quarterback, where the word around the program is that Tyson Bagent is a Harlan Hill Trophy candidate. He will be bolstered by a strong core of receivers, including Jonathan Moss from Murray State. The secondary is going to be especially good. Antonio Fox, Ponce de Leon, and Donnell Howard were all honored by the PSAC in 2019. Kris Lane is the big name among the linebackers. Chuck rejoins us. Chuck, Shepherd Rams, because of the cancellation of the 2020 season, it's easy to forget that they're in the PSAC, but they were picked to win the East this year. Does that surprise you at all?
Yeah, I follow this conference very closely, and even for me, it still seems a little unusual to see the name Shepherd associated with it. But to answer your question, no, it's not surprising at all. This is one of the strongest programs in the Northeast region right now, and they earned 6 out of 8 first place votes in the coaches poll. So certainly coaches look at them as the favorite, and I would have to agree with that. They're the best looking team in the division going into the season. Shepherd has a proven track record for reloading. Even in years when they've had high graduation rates, they seem to reload. And they always have a good defense. And this year's defense has multiple all PSAC first teamers returning. They should be really good in the defensive front. They have a pair of linebackers in Kris Lane, had over 100 tackles in 2019. Kyle Smith, who led the team in sacks and tackles for loss. They're both going to be back. And I really like Juwan Addison as an explosive edge rusher. He should have a big year as a full-time starter. And then offensively, they have one of the top returning quarterbacks in Division II. Tyson Bagent is a junior. He already has almost 7,500 passing yards for his career, so he's an enormous weapon for this offense. He was a Harlan Hill candidate in 2019, and he's on my short list of players to watch in 2021. So there's a lot to like about this Shepherd team, and they should have their expectations set very high.
Number 18, Carson Newman.
The Eagles were 9-3 in 2019. They finished third place in the South Atlantic Conference and lost to Lenore-Rhind in the second round of the playoffs. They beat UVA Wise in their only game this past spring. The Eagles returned 3 starters on offense, 4 on defense. So what's changed since 2019 for Carson Newman? Well, almost everything. Only 7 full-time starters returned. A pair of receivers, Braxton Westfield and Romaine Kelly, return on offense. While leading rusher Antonio Wimbush is gone, second leading rusher Troy Dindy is back. There are more answers on defense. Linebackers Rondro Peebles, Daniel Dixon-Brooks, and Nick Owens are all back. SAT columnist Chuck Bidner rejoins us. And Chuck, right now it appears that there are more questions than there are answers at Carson Newman.
There are a lot of questions about Carson Newman heading into 2021. And the biggest one that I have is, what is Carson Newman's identity? They only played 1 game in the spring season. It was just enough to give us a teaser of what they might or might not look like in the fall. We saw a very different offensive philosophy, a lot more passing out of the offense. Historically, Carson Newman has been a very competent passing offense, but as we know, they've been very committed to a veer rushing attack style of offense. And we saw a pretty drastic departure from that during that spring game at UVA Wise. So my biggest question is what will be their identity? And if they're going to go towards a more modernized passing style of offense, they certainly have the talent to do that. They've got some outstanding wide receivers on the roster. They have a transfer from East Tennessee State who's going to take over the starting quarterback role. He played pretty well during that game, has, I think, 11 or 12 Division I starts to his credit. So the talent is certainly there. I think that we won't see a complete departure from the rushing attack. They've still got a lot of talent there to execute that as well. Offensive line is going to be a big variable also. They graduated almost the entire offensive line from the 2019 team. So there's still a lot of far as what their offense will look like, what their philosophy will be. They gave us a really nice teaser in that spring game, but there's still a lot that we don't know about what they'll look like in the fall. What we do know is that they should still have a very, very good defense. There's a lot of all-conference talent there. I really like their defensive line. There's some excellent senior leadership there. Linebacking core looks really good as well. So some questions on offense, but I think they'll be very good on defense. And this should be a team that's going to be very, very capable of challenging for a SAC title.
Number 17, Bowie State.
The Bulldogs were 11-1 in 2019. They were the champions of the CIAA, but lost to Carson Newman in the first round of the playoffs and returned 7 starters on offense and defense. A disappointing end to a 10-win season will provide a lot of motivation for the Bulldogs. Back is CIAA Player of the Year Jerome Johnson. He threw for over 1,800 yards and also led the team on the ground, 4 yards shy of 1,000. Khalil Wilkins, the second leading rusher on the team, returns for his senior season as well. Defensive lineman Joshua Pryor is back to wreck opposing offenses. He had 25 tackles for loss in 2019. Dimitri Morcell returns in the secondary. Both were All-Americans in 2019. Joining us now is Kris Ferguson. He is the CIAA columnist for D2Football.com. Kris, Bowie went 10-0 in the regular season last year, lost in the first round of the playoffs. I've got to think that a deeper playoff run is the goal at Bowie State.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. Bowie tends to schedule pretty well. They've done that this year with Saginaw Valley. First meeting for them for a GLIAC school, New Haven, who's projected to be tops in their league in Northeast 10. A lot of returners. The quarterback, Jerome Johnson, former Player of the Year for the conference. Khalil Wilkins, running back, solid offensive line. They got a terror on the defensive line with Joshua Pryor, Tevin Singleton's coming back at the cornerback position, and Dimitri Morcell, who was the Player of the Year on defense last time the CIAA played. So the Bowie's one of those teams where they kind of like 2017, 2018, they went to the playoffs, kind of lost in the first round. Those guys have a lot of experience coming back, and I think that they'll be able to get past the first round this year.
Number 16, Kutztown.
Kutztown finished 11-2 in 2019. They were first in the PSAC East and lost to Notre Dame in the second round of the playoffs. They returned 3 starters on offense, 7 on defense. 5 first-team all-conference offensive players are gone, including quarterback Colin DeGalbo. Right now, it looks like senior Eric Nickel will have the task of replacing him. Kutztown lost 4 of 5 starters on the line, including 3 first-teamers. Luke Lozowicki is the only returning starter. The defense is in better shape. 7 starters return there. On the back end, Sean Turber-Ortiz and Nick Palmer are back after being All-PSAC in 2019. Chuck Bittner rejoins us. Kutztown was the PSAC East champs in 2019. This year, they are picked 3rd in their own division. Any clue why the coaches might have voted that way?
Yeah, it's a little bit unusual because usually the coaches polls tend to reflect what happened the year before, but it's really down to 2 things. First, the PSA East is a very competitive division. You've got a lot of programs that are very rich in football tradition. And secondly, it's just the number of impact players that Kutztown lost after the 2019 season. There's just unknowns all over their starting lineup. And I think the coaches just don't know what Kutztown is going to have this year. But I think that makes Kutztown a very interesting team to watch because this could be a program that actually comes out of this gap year in a better position than they might have been 12 months ago. They're going to have a lot of new starters, but these are going to be players that are in their 3rd or even 4th year in the program. And we have to remember that there are players with freshman eligibility that are now in their 3rd preseason camp. So they may be shy on game experience, but they've been around the program and there's a lot of familiarity there. So I think the poll really just speaks to how difficult it is to understand these teams and what they may or may not have. We just really don't know a lot about this Golden Bears team. What I do know is that the current coaching staff has recruited really well in the time that they've been there. They grow their talent from within the program. And when I think about coaches that do an exceptional job of making the most out of the resources they have, Jim Clements is one of the top names that comes to mind for me. So the coaches poll could be right. They might be a 3rd or 4th place team, but I really won't be surprised if Kutztown outperforms those preseason expectations.
Number 15, Indianapolis.
The Greyhounds finished 9-2 in 2019. They were second place in the Great Lakes Valley Conference and lost to Central Missouri in the first round of the playoffs. In the spring, they finished 3-0 and returned 8 starters on offense and 4 on defense. UIndy had to like where it was headed coming into the 2021 season, but the exit of Al McKellar and an injury to Davion Bell have slightly curbed that enthusiasm. The projected 1-2 punch of McKellar and Toriano Clinton has now morphed into the Toriano Clinton show. But even though he's gone, the offense and the team returns a ton of players. Jacob Jones and Alec Patch should provide an impact on the defensive line. Lauren Strickland is back in the secondary. Brian Ramos rejoins us again. The Greyhounds of Indianapolis had a very successful season last year. Had a lot of things to look forward to this year, but right now it's kind of a story of what's not coming back rather than what is coming back.
Yeah, so Indianapolis did participate in the spring season. They won spring, actually defeated Truman in the first ever GLVC championship game. Lots of stuff to build on. Unfortunately, as happens as part of football, had some pretty serious injuries. Davion Bell and Aaron Matteo, not to the least of them. Davion Bell was probably one of the best returners in the country and very dynamic player, could do a lot with him. Also, Al McKellar, the all-time GLVC leading rusher, transferred to Northwest Missouri State. They still have Toriano Clinton in the backfield and a great offensive line. They should be able to move the ball very well, especially with seventh-year quarterback Bryce Stancombe, that rare seventh-year senior. He's threw for 10 touchdowns in 3 games in the spring, so got a lot to look forward there. Also returned 10 defensive starters off of a defense that ranked first in the conference in both scoring defense and total defense. So yeah, they're set up pretty well. Have a lot of experience coming back. Should be another successful year for the Greyhounds.
Number 14, Harding.
The Bisons were 11-2 in 2019. They were second place in the Great American Conference and lost to Northwest Missouri in the first round of the playoffs and returned 7 starters on offense, but only 2 on defense. If they're going to get back to the playoffs in 2021, they'll do it with a lot of new faces. The Bison's defense returns only 2 starters. Linebacker Dylan Hendricks was first team all-conference and D-back Corey Beatty was named to the third team. The Bison's offense is in better shape. Cole Chansey rushed for over 1,300 yards. He is one of several backs who will carry the load, including quarterback Preston Payton, who rushed for 624 yards. Joining us now is Troy Mitchell. He is the new GAC columnist for D2Football.com. And Troy, you're a veteran of the GAC, and one thing that we can for sure expect is for Harding to run the football this year.
Well, they're a historically running football team. They finished 10-2 in 2019 and advanced to the NCAA playoffs for the 4th straight time. We talk about their offense. Well, they're rushing. They've led the nation in 2019, averaging over 370 yards on the ground per game, and they returned 8 starters on that offense, including all GAC running back Cole Chansey. Taylor Bissell also returns, and quarterback Preston Payton. Now, Chansey rushed for 1,375 yards in 2019 and had 13 touchdowns. Only needs 542 yards to become Harding's all-time leading rusher. Bissell, on the other hand, he gets a lot of yardage. He's averaging almost 10 yards per carry during his career. And Payton is the quarterback. Now, he totaled 600 yards of rushing as a quarterback and threw for 386 yards. They're going to rely on him to throw the ball just a little bit more, but that ground game, their offense is going to be so solid. The key will be defense. They only returned 3 starters. However, they led the GAC 7 of the last 8 years in total defense, so they always build up that defense. Look for linebacker Dylan Hendricks to lead the team after having 53 tackles, including 9 for lost yardage in 2019. Another guy garnering a lot of attention from NFL scouts is cornerback Corey Beatty. Now, again, it's going to come down to the 3 big games, I think, for Harding against Ouachita Baptist, Henderson State, and Oklahoma Baptist.
Number 13, Ouachita Baptist.
The Tigers were 11-1 in 2019. They won the Great American Conference, but lost to Lindenwood in the first round of the playoffs. They returned 6 starters on offense, 4 on defense. The Tigers have won 3 GAC championships in a row. Winning a 4th could prove to be a difficult task. 8 all-GAC players are gone. Also gone is quarterback Braden Brazil, who still had eligibility remaining. So who will be the quarterback? Right now, it looks like it will be a competition between Grant Allen and transfer Riley Harms. Both have collegiate experience. The defense was hit hard, not in terms of names, but in terms of numbers. Among the 4 returning starters are all GAC players Austin Guyman and Damian McDonald. And quickly rejoining us is Troy Mitchell, GAC columnist. And Troy, Washita comes in at number 13. Tell me about OBU this year.
Well, they've won the last 3 GAC titles. They're picked to win it again. And Coach Todd Knight has done a fantastic job with Washita. He always continues to bring in some great talent into Arkadelphia every year. Now, Washita's lost some key skilled players on offense, including his top running back in Brockton Brown and top receiver in Allie Freeman. But TJ Cole was a big force on the ground 2 years ago. The junior from Texarkana rushed for 613 yards as a sophomore and has done nothing but gotten stronger in the last 2 years. Hayden Walkers is OBU's top returning receiver. He totaled nearly 300 yards 2 years ago, and you can look for him to be the go-to guy as a receiver for the Tigers. As of now, it looks like sophomore Grant Allen will be the quarterback for the Tigers. Now, he only played in 7 games, but he was important in those 7 games as a freshman. Now, he was highly touted out of high school, throwing for over 4,000 yards and 44 touchdowns, completing 62% of his passes at Springdale. So he definitely has the talent to run that Tiger offense. Defensively, the Tigers return all GAC linebacker Austin Guyman, who totaled 88 tackles in 2019, which led the team. The Tigers will be tested right out of the gate as they open the season against Oklahoma Baptist, who has 18 returning starters, including their quarterback. It could come down to that last game of the season, the Battle of the Ravine against Henderson State, which is again at Cliff Harris Stadium.
Number 12, CSU Pueblo.
The Thunderwolves finished with a record of 11-2 in 2019. They finished second place in the RMAC and lost to Minnesota State 35-7 in the second round of the playoffs, and returned 9 starters on offense, 5 on defense. CSUP has one of the most interesting schedules in the country. They're also going to have a new starting quarterback for the 3rd season in a row. Who will that be? They're not even sure in Pueblo. It might be Gunnar Lamphere, a program guy. It might come from the outside. No matter, the offensive line should be great for the Pack, with 5 all-conference linemen returning. James Parker and Jonas Dubar were first-team All-RMAC honorees in 2019. Nick Williams and tight end Preston Guerra will be targets for whoever the quarterback might be. The Pueblo defense was one of the best in the RMAC, but loses 5 all-conference players. Trey Botts on the line, Trevor Filio at linebacker, and Corey McClellan in the secondary are returning all-conference players. Max Gonzalez and Marcus Lawrence will also play a significant role in the success of the defense. And joining us now is new RMAC columnist Jimmy Pilato. Jimmy, thanks for joining us. It's great to have you on board.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for giving me this opportunity. Love talking about RMAC football.
Well, the T-Wolves come in at number 12. What do you think about the kind of season that they could have this year?
They are still one of the top teams in the conference, whether or not they're losing guys and in the process of trying to figure out what teams are going to do, not having last season. Pueblo is still going to be pretty solid. You mentioned Trevor Filio. I think he's going to step up. He had a huge year in 2019, exploding for 13.5 tackles for loss and 67 total tackles, and he'll be able to bring along some of the younger guys like Max Gonzalez there in that linebacking core. So the Pueblo defense is still going to be strong. Their offense is going to have to find some sort of explosiveness to it so that they can keep up with the stalwarts that they have on the defensive side of the ball. And I think a guy that just got transferred into Pueblo, Michael Roots from Central Washington, he could bring that explosive element to the offense that the Thunderwolves have been kind of lacking in recent years on the offensive side of the ball.
Number 11, Central Missouri.
The Mules were 11-2 in 2019. They were the co-champions of the MIAA and lost to Ferris State in the second round of the playoffs, and returned 6 starters on offense, 9 on defense. The Mules will try to overcome the loss of MIAA Player of the Year and All-American Brooke Bowles to graduation, All-American wide receiver Shea Wyatt to Tulane, and All-American tight end Zach Davidson to the NFL. A lot of that will depend on the kind of season that Kyle Bradley has. He will take over for Bowles at quarterback and get help with the return of Devontae Turner at running back. In contrast to the offense, the defense has a lot coming back. Cody Bell will be the leader on that side of the ball, He had 81 tackles. Zach Asherman will be relied upon to pressure the quarterback for the Mules. And we are joined now by Devin Albertson. He is the MIAA columnist for D2Football.com. All right, Devin, what do you think of the Mules' chances in 2021?
Well, as you said there, Brandon, they have a lot of firepower to replace this year with Bowles, Wyatt, and Davidson. They're leaving either to graduation or to the NFL. But I think Kyle Bradley, the new quarterback, is primed to star and coach the Boda's offense with the help of Devontae Turner and Kobe Rickerson in the backfield, as well as 3 returning starters in that offensive line. That offense should still be fine going into 2021. But as you said, their defense struggled a bit in 2019 versus some of the big dogs, but it should be a seasoned group in 2021. As you said, they're led by 8 returning starters, Cody Bell and Zach Osherman leading the way. Central Missouri should be a very good football team this year.
Before we reveal the top 10, we wanted to take a minute to thank everyone that has directly supported the site. These folks have made this video possible as well as to help us survive and thrive. D2Football.com might be free, but it isn't cheap. If you like this video and like to see us produce more, or simply want to help support our efforts to promote our great game, please consider joining them. You can visit D2Football.com/support. There are options for monthly support as well as one-time considerations. There is a link in the description. Any way you can help is appreciated. Thank you in advance. Now back to the countdown.
Number 10, Notre Dame College.
The Falcons were 11-2 in 2019 and won the MEC. They lost in the quarterfinals to Slippery Rock. They were an unblemished 5-0 in the spring of 2021 and returned 6 starters on offense, 8 starters on defense.
You know, at the end of the day, we won 3 in a row, but the 4th one's going to be the hardest, right? So this team's identity kind of has to, you know, take a page out of, you know, the older ones, what they've done well, the culture that we have built in previous years, which is fantastic, and it has to continue. But they also have to put their own spin on it so they can make it their own. That way, obviously, it's just, you know, they're building on something that, you know, been accomplished in the past.
Jaleel McLaughlin earned All-American honors in both his freshman and sophomore seasons. In 2019, he was the National Offensive Player of the Year. Unfortunately for NDC, he is now at Youngstown State. So quarterback Kris will have to prove that he can win without a proven running back. The other side of the ball returns almost complete. 8 starters return. On the defensive line, Jack Costco returns with 15 career sacks. Linebackers Guam Lee and Nate Moore both earned All-MEC honors in 2019, while Bryce Shepard was the Defensive Freshman of the Year. Once again, Chuck Bittner rejoins us. Earlier, I made the joke that he was a jack of all trades on D2Football.com. During the spring this past season, he helped with coverage of the MEC. In fact, he was the lone coverage of the MEC. But Chuck, looking back to 2019, Jaleel McLaughlin is no longer at Notre Dame College. Mike Jacobs is no longer at Notre Dame College. Those are huge losses for that program to take.
Yeah, absolutely, Brandon. Those are huge losses to absorb. But, you know, of all the teams that played in the spring, Notre Dame was possibly the most impressive, and they certainly gave me the impression that they're ready to take on any type of challenge. It was really a great opportunity for them to play. Mickey Mental has taken over as the head coach, and it's his first head coaching job, but he's been with this program really since it began about a decade ago. So it makes for a very smooth transition from a coaching point of view. The Falcons played 5 games. They won all 5 by an average of 38 points. So that said, a big reason for their success over the recent years has been their running game. Well, Jaleel McLaughlin's not there anymore. He's transferred to a Division I institution. And they seem to not miss a beat in the spring with Tobias Taylor transferring in from Virginia Union. And he had a monster spring, averaging more than 200 yards per game. He elected to call it a career after that spring season. So we still need to see who's going to step up as a number 1 rusher. Good news is they have Kris back. He's a very experienced quarterback and probably one that we should be discussing when we talk about the top quarterbacks in all of Division II. So they're going to have to rely on him a lot more until they kind of identify the depth chart at the running back position. But I think that that'll probably come together. Defensively, they should have one of the best linebacking units in the region. Guam Lee is a 2-time all-conference player. Nathan Moore is back after a huge season in 2019. Both played very well in the spring. And Dylan Spieth also stepped up in a big way. at the linebacker position in the spring. So they're going to have a really stacked linebacker unit. That's a lot to build around. So there's a lot of things to feel good about heading into the 2021 season. Also something to really look forward to. They open the season with Ashland coming to their campus. So that's going to be a really exciting week 1 matchup. Should be a great test for both programs. They're not very far apart, only about 70 miles. So it should be a really exciting week 1 matchup. And it's definitely going to let us see right off the bat just what Notre Dame has in 2021.
Number 9, Slippery Rock.
The Rock finished 13-1 in 2019. They were the champions of the PSAC, but lost to Minnesota State in the semifinals and returned 8 starters on offense and 8 on defense.
But those accolades don't really mean anything at all. Those are based on 2019 season. It was a magical year. Those things are hard to overcome again when you lose a Roland Rivers, a Harlan Hill finalist, and a great player in Brad Zaffron. Those type of players don't come around very often.
The best season in Slippery Rock history was 2019. Not even the blowout loss to Minnesota State changes that fact. But the loss of Harlan Hill Trophy winner Roland Rivers is huge for the Rock. Redshirt senior Andrew Kester will be the man trying to fill those shoes as the starting quarterback. All-American Henry Litwin is back at wide receiver, along with Kadir Nixon and Sin-Q Sweeting. Tight end John Aiken is also back. Defensive end Chad Kuhn earned All-American honors last year, and Jeff Marks returns on the interior of the defensive line. Transfer Jamal Winter is expected to make an immediate impact. 2 linebackers return, as do 3 members of the secondary. Kris Ferguson rejoins us. Kris, Slippery Rock comes in at number 9. All sorts of players returning all over the field. But the story there is obviously going to be who replaces Roland Rivers.
Yeah, so Slippery Rock out of the PSAC, they're returning conference champions. Has a lot returning across on both sides of the ball, but the real question is who does replace Roland Rivers, and that will be Andrew Kester. Kester was actually the starter in 2018 and then got hurt. And so you have somebody who's a redshirt senior who does have experience in the system and should be fairly productive in this in Slippery Rock's offense. Now, Kester's going to have quite a bit of weapons around him, particularly the top 3 wide receivers in Litwin, Wynn, and Sweeting, all coming back in the passing game. They're going to be a little young at running back, probably relying on a transfer there. The offensive line is going to be kind of a mix of some veterans and younger players who haven't had much playing time. The defense will start defensive end Chad Kuhn, who was All-American, with some returners there. Also some experience in linebacker and in the backfield. I think the issue though with Slippery Rock is can they continue to outscore offenses? They have a tendency to get into shootouts, which is typical video game PSAC level shows that you tend to see. Also, with a lot of young players comes a lot of penalties in a lot of cases. Slippery Rock penalized 99 yards a game in 2019. Can they cut that down? I think will help. Very high on 3rd down conversions nonetheless, but it'll be really interesting to see can they keep that pace going into 2021, and can they repeat? They were the last school to repeat as PSAC champions 2014, 2015. Can they do that again and be a repeat champion? Things look good, and it'll be really interesting to see as we go through the season.
Number 8, Colorado School of Mines.
The Orediggers finished 12-1 in 2019. They were the champions of the RMAC and lost in the second round to Texas A&M Commerce and returned 7 starters on offense and defense.
We are a playoff caliber team, and that's where we want to be every year in Mines. And that's our mindset. That's where our kids, our players think, our coaches coach, that we want to play 15, 16 games.
In 2019, the Colorado School of Mines Orediggers had one of the most successful seasons in school history. It came as somewhat of a surprise. Quarterback John Mataka and running back Michael Zeman burst onto the scene and earned first-team all-conference honors. That helped CSM run the table in the regular season, 25 players were named to the All-RMAC team. Many of them return. In addition to Mataka and Zeman, all-conference wide receiver Josh Johnson is back, as well as 2 all-conference linemen. On defense, Luke Jeter and Jack McAdams are back on the line, while Mac Minahan and Nolan Reed return at linebacker. Kobe Brewster will lead in the secondary along with Mason Pierce. And once again joining us is Jimmy Pilato, the RMAC columnist. Jimmy, CSM comes in at number 8. What are their chances for the 2021 season?
School of Mines never really has the great talent that you see around the rest of the country, but they're always very, very disciplined. And I think that leads them well, especially under head coach Greg Brandon. He's done a great job since taking over the program back in 2014, I believe. He's brought a winning culture, and it's stayed there. You mentioned Michael Zeman, who got his shot after injury last season, and he went on to play great. For whatever reason, Colorado School of Mines just breeds really talented running backs who always put up big numbers and are good after the catch in other areas of the game as well. And then on defense, Luke Jeter, former Cliff Harris Award winner, he's going to be anchoring that Ore Digger defense. I think they'll surprise some people again, but now having the expectation, I'm interested to see how they're coming off the lack of season in 2020, see how they follow up. Like you said, one of their greatest seasons in school history. They have not lost a regular season game since 2019, so they're on a roll, and I think they could be looking to give some people some trouble this season.
Number 7, Lenore Rhine.
The Bears finished 13-1 in 2019. They won the South Atlantic Conference, lost to West Florida in the quarterfinals. The Bears went 3-1 this past spring and returned 4 starters on offense and 4 on defense.
You know, there is a core and a foundation of guys that are used to winning and winning a lot. And then a bunch of young kids, and a bunch of those young kids were freshmen last year and got their feet wet a little bit in the spring season. And there's nothing like the experience of playing in a game, whether it's a shortened season or not. So to have those guys come back and maintain freshman eligibility, I think we're excited about the future here.
We were robbed of a look at how LRU would change under new coach Mike Jacobs when football was taken away from us in the fall. But a shortened spring schedule might have provided us a glimpse of what is to come. Quarterback Grayson Willingham more than doubled his yards per game in the spring, averaging 316 per game. The defense was hardest hit by graduation, especially in terms of star power, most notably Kyle Duggar. The Bears will be without second-team All-American Jaquan Artist. Fortunately for LRU, defensive tackle Dan Luba returns to anchor the front line. Chuck Bittner rejoins us again. Chuck, college coaches are experts at replacing players. But Kyle Duggar is a special player, an NFL draft pick. How is Lenore Rhine going to do that?
Yeah, it's not every year that you have a second-round draft pick on the roster. So that's a lot to try to replace or find the right pieces to replace that talent. So it's not an easy thing to do. Great thing for Lenore Rhine. I thought that they looked outstanding on the defensive side of the ball in the spring season. I had a lot of questions about what they were going to look like. It wasn't just Kyle Duggar that they lost. There was a lot of other talent from that defensive unit in 2019 that's no longer there. And there were a lot of new names and new faces in the starting lineup when they took to the field in that spring season. Good news for them. I thought they looked fantastic. They played really well as a unit, still have some really good defensive linemen. Dan Luba and Marty Houston are outstanding defensive linemen. They're going to be really tough up there. They have some really good defensive backs as well. They have a player. I don't want to put pressure on him to be a Kyle Duggar replacement, but they had some players that looked really, really good. Somebody who really stood out to me, Percy King, a redshirt freshman. He's a Duggar-like player. He can kind of play that hybrid position of being a linebacker, defensive back, could contribute a little bit on special teams as well. So you don't just have somebody you insert into the lineup that replaces a second-round draft pick in a Division II program. But I think the Bears are pretty well set on defense. They're gonna play pretty well in this 2021 fall season. Offensively, they're also going to be just phenomenal. I think Grayson Willingham is going to be one of the most experienced quarterbacks in Division II this year. It starts with him. They've got some really good running backs that are young players. We haven't really seen them a lot. But they played very well in the spring as well. So I think that there's going to be a lot of newness to this Lenore Rhine football team. But I think what won't be new is the results that we see out of that. Just because the names and faces are going to be different, I don't think the results are going to change. They're my pick to win the South Atlantic Conference in 2021, and I think that they're going to be right back in the thick of the playoff race as well.
Number 6, Valdosta State.
The Blazers finished 10-1 in 2019. They were the Gulf South Conference champions, but lost in the second round to West Florida, and returned 5 starters on offense, 6 on defense.
But going back to 19, yeah, we've got some unfinished business. It was a tough way to end that season, but, we got to do a couple things just better is all. We've got the talent. The guys have the work ethic, and, we're looking forward to this upcoming season.
All eyes in South Georgia will be on quarterback Ivory Durham, the replacement for Rogan Wells. All indications are that he has a chance to be really good. He is more of a dual threat than Wells, but is still thrown at a 55% clip. As usual in Valdosta, there will be plenty of talented targets, including first-team All-Conference receiver Brian Sands. The Blazers won't have 2 All-Americans on the line, but return Ralph Singleton and will probably rely on a few transfers. Much less is truly known about the defense. Corey Roberts is the only defensive player returning that earns Gulf South Conference honors. After an earlier than expected exit from the playoffs in 2019, Coach Gary Goff should be looking for a deep playoff run in 2021. And joining us now is Justin Polizzi. He is the new Gulf South columnist for D2Football.com. Justin, Valdosta State comes in at number 6. It's a nice ranking. But one thing I've observed over the years with Valdosta State is that when a lot is expected of them, they sometimes don't meet those expectations. Opposite, though, sometimes when not a lot is expected of them, they overachieve and exceed expectations. Is this the type of team that can overachieve and exceed a number 6 ranking?
Yeah, Brandon, I definitely think they can. They come in 6th ranked team in the country right now, number 2 in the preseason poll for the Gulf South. I think that Coach Goff has the pieces in place. Valdosta State is going to make a run in the playoffs. I would anticipate seeing that. 2018 national champs get knocked out of the playoffs by West Florida deep in the playoffs in 2019, have not played since the playoff loss versus West Florida in 2019, except for a joint practice this past spring. So very little game action for the Blazers. I think that this is going to be it's important for them to get out early this fall camp rather, because they haven't seen actual competitive action. You can have a joint practice all you want, but again, it's going to be so important for them to hit the ground running, so to speak, here this fall with 2 pretty tough non-conference opponents in Savannah State and Virginia Union to start non-conference play. I think Coach Goff's going to be able to really gauge where his team is, but I definitely can see Valdosta State making that run deep into the playoffs. Ivory Durham replaces Rogan Wells at quarterback for Coach Goff. Ivory Durham is an athletic young man. He's got a lot of arm strength and a lot of athletic mobility and can do a lot of amazing things, arguably one of the fastest guys on the field when he's out there. So I don't anticipate them missing too much of a beat from Rogan Wells to Ivory Durham. And also some other key, I think, important faces that you'll see for the Blazers this fall. Jamar Thompson is a solid running back. He's got good size and speed. Seth McGill, he's versatile and can play multiple positions on offense. Brian Sands, 2,000 yards receiving for the Blazers. So, again, I think offensively the Blazers are loaded and ready to really kind of make a run. And also up front, they were able to build some depth in the offseason up front with the O-line, which is definitely going to help here as the season gets going on. They're probably the newest group for the Blazers. They graduated several of their players in 2019, and they've added some grad transfers to that group. So I anticipate their offense to be highly touted as expected. Defensively, I think the DBs are probably the group that's going to lead them. They have a lot of depth in the secondary, and I can really – the Gulf South is a very, very tough conference to play in and week out. So the depth and the experience is, I think, going to carry the Blazers a long way, especially going late in the season against West Florida in the season finale. I think that very well could determine the conference championship and potentially a super region spot for the playoffs.
Number 5, Texas A&M Commerce.
The Lions finished 11-3 in 2019. They finished in second place in the Lone Star Conference and lost to Minnesota State in the quarterfinals, and returned 6 starters on offense and 5 on defense.
Yeah, it's really exciting. There's a lot of history about the schedule because Pueblo we obviously faced in 2019. Then my true freshman year was West Florida in the Natty, so it's very exciting.
The Lions had 16 players named All-LSC in 2019, with running back Antonio Lealei, quarterback Miklos Smalls, and wide receiver Chance Cooper. Commerce was loaded at the offensive skill positions. All 3 of those earned All-LSC honors in 2019. The only real question is Smalls, who is reportedly rehabbing a knee injury that he hurt during the spring. The program is very hush-hush about his status. The defense is in great shape as well, especially on the backside. All-American Dominique Ramsey is joined by all-conference honorees Kader Kohu and Alex Shiloh to form a great secondary. Defensive ends Elijah Earls and Ronathan Elmore are back, but replacements will have to be found in the middle of the defense. We welcome in Brock Calloway. He is the former LSC columnist for D2Football.com, currently serves as the color commentator for Texas A&M Commerce Radio on KETR. Brock, I've known you for quite a while, and you know, if I'm judging this correctly, this is as excited as you have ever been for Commerce football.
Yeah, it's looking to be a really good year. You know, heading into that 2017 year, with the Lions won the national championship. Hopes were high. I don't think they were quite this high, though. We knew we had a really good team, but I tell you what, so many players coming back from 2019. Obviously, Lions did not play in 2020. They gave the players the vote to play. If they wanted to take the year off, obviously due to COVID, they chose to take that year off. One of the things that has been shocking, though, every single player from that senior squad has come back except for 3, and those 3 weren't going to see much time. So an incredible depth coming back. You mentioned the defensive backs. Dominique Ramsey, All-American. Kader Kohu, incredible player. He's been an All-American as well in a couple of publications I've seen. The linebacker roles there are going to be a little bit new, like you mentioned there in the middle, but across on the offensive side as well. Amon Simon, preseason All-American. Going back to that heralded preseason so far, Lions had the offensive and defensive preseason players of the year for the conference, and Miklos Smalls, who you mentioned, as well as Dominique Ramsey. They were also chosen to win the Lone Star Conference, so it's just across the board, incredible lean in here to the season to start.
Number 4, Northwest Missouri.
The Bearcats finished with a record of 12-2 in 2019. They were co-champions of the MIAA and lost to Ferris State in the quarterfinals of the playoffs, and returned 6 starters on offense and 5 on defense.
You know, we come here to win a national championship, and we didn't accomplish that, and that's not how we want to end. We don't want to end losing in the playoffs. We want to play for it all, and that's just the standard we have, and that's what it means a lot to us to come back and be able to compete for that.
The Northwest Missouri offense could look a little different this year and more consistent because Coach Rich Wright brought in a coordinator from outside the program, a first since 1993. The Bearcats also got a boost by the late transfer of former Indianapolis running back Al McKellar. He is the all-time leading rusher at UIndy and should provide an immediate impact to help Braden Wright, who was second-team All-MIAA quarterback in 2019. Amani Donadell was also second-team All-Conference in 2019 and is poised for a huge year. All-American Tanner Owen anchors the line and is a first-team All-American candidate this year. The defense should be stout as usual in spite of losing MIAA Defensive Player of the Year Spencer Phillips. NFL prospect Sam Roberts returns on the line, as does Zach Howard. Sam Phillips and Jackson Barnes return at linebacker after being named All-Conference. A lot of transfers, more than usual for the program, could contribute right away in the secondary. A national championship is typically the main goal at Northwest. This could be Wright's best opportunity at that since he took over for the Bearcats. Again, we bring on the MIAA columnist for D2Football.com. Devin, what do you think of Northwest's chances this year?
Well, the Bearcats are back in the top 5, and they're primed for a deep playoff run. As you said there in the opening, Braden Wright, he's entering his 3rd year as the Bearcat signal caller. He's a very talented quarterback that just shore up a couple of things with his fundamentals and his footwork to unlock his full potential. And with weapons like Donadell on the outside with a deep threat and then possession receiver Alec Tatum, he has the weapons to do that. Also, Keller there in the backfield should be a dynamic, explosive running back for him. But if Northwest is known for something other than the trophies in their trophy case, it is their defense. And you said there with Howard and Roberts up front, they're going to terrorize MIAA quarterbacks this year. And I love Sam Phillips and Jackson Barnes there patrolling the middle of that defense. If the secondary can hold up and this offense can be a little more consistent than it has the last couple of years, the Bearcats could add a 7th national championship trophy to their case.
Number 3, Ferris State.
The Bulldogs finished 12-1 in 2019. Their only loss? To West Florida 28-14 in the semifinals. They won the GLIAC and returned 6 starters on offense and 3 on defense.
The last time we won our last game was 2013. And so 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, we ended the season with a loss. And even though we've only had 2 losses in 18 and 19, we were 27-2, we still were hungry.
A lot of starters are gone, but a lot of regulars return for the Bulldogs. On offense, they are highlighted by all-conference receivers Cy Barnett and Xavier Wade. Running back Marvin Campbell was first-team GLIAC, so there are plenty of talented skill players on the Bulldog roster. The man throwing the football to them will come down to the winner of the battle between Evan Cummins and Kent State transfer Malik Mitchell. There are more questions on defense. Austin Simpson and Jordan Jones return to help ease the impact of the loss of Defensive Player of the Year Austin Edwards. They'll also get help from linebacker John Higgins and defensive back Alex Thomas. Many in Big Rapids think this might be the best Ferris State team ever. Joining us again is GLIAC columnist Jake Riepma. Jake, we talked earlier about Grand Valley and how they are trying to return to their prominence as one of the most dominant teams in Division II. Well, a team that really has it rolling in the GLIAC right now is Ferris State. They have become the top team in the conference and one of the best in the country.
There's no doubt about it. They're an absolute powerhouse up there in Big Rapids. Tony Anise and company has them rolling. And look at the resume. I mean, undefeated regular season GLIAC championship in 2019. And going back all the way to Tony Anise tenure at Ferris, he's got the national semifinals appearance. He's got a national title appearance. But all that's missing from that decorated resume is a national championship for the Ferris State Bulldogs. And make no mistake about it, I think you ask anybody in Big Rapids, yes, it's high expectations, but the expectation is for the 2021 season, national championship or bust. And I think if you ask Tony Anise and anybody else, that's how they'd like it. So leave it into the capable hands of one of the more offensively brilliant minds in Tony Anise to put his players in a position to succeed. Of course, they have some questions at quarterback, whether it's going to be Evan Cummings or Malik Mitchell. Evan Cummings, a guy with game experience, but the supporting cast is absolutely loaded. Talk about Marvin Campbell at running back, Cy Barnett at wide receivers. It's just going to be who can get the ball in their hands to make plays. And again, Tony Anise is a guy that can figure that out. He's offensively brilliant, and I'm looking forward to see what he puts forth in Big Rapids and how good that Ferris State offense can be, and just really comes down to outscoring teams in the fall.
Number 2, Minnesota State.
The Mavericks finished 14-1 in 2019. They won the NSIC and their only loss of the year, the national championship game. They returned 4 starters on offense and 3 on defense.
Feels like I'm a kid in a candy store, right? It's the first time to actually have a true fall camp.
If the Mavs are going to make it back to the national championship game, they're going to have to do it with a different cast of characters. Gone is NSIC Offensive Player of the Year Nate Gunn. Also gone is wide receiver Shane Zylstra. Both were second-team All-Americans in 2019. Zylstra is trying to make the Vikings roster, while first-team All-American Evan Heim is now trying to do the same in Detroit. Overall, MSU lost 6 players on offense and 6 on defense that earned all NSIC honors in 2019. J.D. Akawa split some time with former quarterback Ryan Schlichte in 2019 and should take the majority of the snaps this year. Akawa will have the benefit of the return of 3 all-conference offensive linemen, including first-teamer Jared Gosson. While the names were bigger on offense, there is a ton of work to do on defense, where only 3 starters return. The Mavericks could get help from a large group of transfers, something the program has not utilized in the past. And once again joining us is NSIC columnist Matt Witwicky, talking about something he's much more familiar with than the Minnesota State Mavericks. Matt, what is your outlook? What is the outlook for Minnesota State this season?
Yeah, it's going to be a unique season for the Mavs. We're used to seeing household names like Gunn and Zylstra in that huddle. And now Todd Hoffner and his crew are having to reload a little bit and look to see who's going to be that next group of stars for them in the future. He returns J.D. Akawa at quarterback, a guy they may lean on a little bit more for playmaking, as he can make both plays with his arm and on the run as well. They're going to return 3 starting offensive all-league players on the line of scrimmage, so that should help them still be a very physical team up front, which is really their MO all along this great run they've had. I would expect to see a name like Caleb Sleezer, running back for them, become a real household name, probably their next 1,000-yard rusher, along with getting a little bit of help from Oklahoma State transfer Micah Cooper, who may also get to help share with the load a little bit. Along on the defensive side, I think that they may have a little more work to do in that they do return Jack Leas, nickelback, one of their top tacklers from a year ago. However, they have a lot of production to fill on that defensive side. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's where we maybe see some of those transfers that you mentioned come on in and really help plug some holes in this unique year where the Mavericks are having to replace such a high amount of production.
Number 1, West Florida.
The Argos finished 13-2 in 2019. They finished second place in the Gulf South Conference and won the national championship. They returned 8 starters on offense and 5 starters on defense.
I give our guys a lot of credit. They maintained a great attitude. They maintained great effort. They stayed upbeat. And I think that puts us in a position right now going into the fall of 21 where, we've got a really good team that needs to continue to grow and develop, but they've done what's needed to be done to make this thing work.
The only thing that might be more impressive than winning a championship in a program's 4th year in existence would be winning 2 by the 5th year. That will be tough, but that's the goal at West Florida. All-American quarterback Austin Reed is back after setting passing records with 523 yards in the 2019 championship game. He has some tools to work with. All-conference running back Shamari Mason is back, so is Anthony Johnson, who actually led the team in rushing yards. Rodney Coates and Karan Ashley were the 3rd and 4th leading receivers on the team, and Mercer transfer David Durden was named to the 2nd team in his conference. While the offense hogged all the limelight in 2019, the Argo defense put up pretty good numbers, especially by the standards of today's game. 9 of the top 15 tacklers returned. D-back Trent Archie was 2nd on the team in tackles, and he also had 10 tackles for loss. DeAnthony Bell had 11 passes defended and recovered 4 fumbles. He is part of a good secondary that also includes Marcus Clayton and Sherrod Oliver. Matthew Gotel was the leader in tackles for loss among the players returning on the defensive line. The Argos did what seemed impossible when they won the national championship in the program's 4th season. It seems much more likely that they could do it again. Gulf South columnist Justin Polizzi rejoins us. Justin, no surprise, West Florida ranked number 1. A ranking certainly that they deserve and they've earned.
Yeah, it definitely is. Defending national champions, 2017 runners-up. West Florida, what they've done in the very, very short amount of time that they've had a football program is nothing short of amazing. Coach Shinnick has really done a great job of bringing in the right pieces to the puzzle, and I think the pieces that they have going into this year, they've got a giant target on their back, and everybody is gonna try to beat them. They're gonna get everybody's best shot, and I think Coach Shinnick has put together a schedule that will test them early and really prepare them for the tough Gulf South Conference play that they're going to see week in and week out, leading up to the season finale against Valdosta State. But, the Argos, they opened the season up against Division I McNeese State, which is not going to be an easy game by any stretch of the imagination. McNeese State, FCS opponent, is competitive year in and year out. So I think that's going to be an early test for the Argos. And then to end conference play, they're going to play Texas A&M Commerce, a Division II powerhouse that, again, is really going to test the Argos, not just physically, but mentally coming out of non-conference play before they get into conference play. And I think that Coach Shinnick had a method to his madness here. I think he put together a great schedule, a tough schedule for the Argos that's really going to challenge them, that makes the Gulf South Conference not as daunting week in and week out. And then obviously the season finale against Valdosta State is sure to draw everybody's attention because it has the potential to not just determine the conference champion, but also a national champion later on in the postseason. But don't overlook some of those other schools in the conference like West Alabama, West Georgia, Delta State, all going to be tough opponents for the Argos throughout conference play. West Florida, obviously led by sophomore quarterback Austin Reed, threw for over 2,000 yards as a freshman player of the year for the conference. They have a deep running back room led by senior Anthony Johnson. They lost 3 receivers in the 2019 graduation class, so that they're going to have to replace them offensively, but I don't think Coach Shinnick's too worried about that. And then defensively, they're led again by a defensive back group that is extremely talented, and they had 4 starters that played in the national championship in 2019. So defensively, they have some experience as well as offensively. So you look at those 2 components and then the tough non-conference schedule that West Florida has. I expect West Florida to make another deep run in the postseason and compete for another national championship.
Well, there you have it. Can West Florida defend its title? Will there be another first-time champion in Division II? Or will one of the Blue Bloods add to their collection? Find out by following us every day on D2Football.com. We've been the center of the D2 football world since 2000. But before we go, we'd like to invite you to join our Sunday night chat soon after the credits roll. You can interact with us live on YouTube and Facebook. Visit our profiles on either of these sites for links. Once again, thanks for joining us.